Yeah, I'm afraid we're in for a rough 4 years, which maybe would have happened regardless, but I'm just telling you that Trump administration's trade policies are sort of guaranteeing that it's going to happen and also guaranteeing that he's going to catch the blame for it. That's not a good situation.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for April 22nd through April 29th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, we feature 1-ounce silver Canadian maples at their lowest premium in years at just $3.49 over spot. Next, 1-ounce Gold Philharmonics are only $65 over spot. 1 10th-ounce Platinum Britannia are just $29 over melt. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. I'm your host, Dunnigan Kaiser, the founder of Liberty and Finance. Today, I'm delighted to welcome a returning guest, Jeffrey Tucker, a widely read author, a contributor at Epoch Times, and the founder of the Brownstone Institute, joins us this Monday, April 21st, 2025. Jeffrey, thank you for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Sure, it's nice to be here.
We were delighted that we had you on about a month ago for your first visit here, and glad we could have you back. You write prolifically on many topics, often having to do with freedom and justice and private property rights, traditionalism, all kinds of things that are of high interest to our viewers and subscribers. An article that you wrote just recently caught my eye. It is The Trouble with Compulsory Globalism. In that article, you outlined succinctly your concerns about what we have all experienced in the past. It reared its ugly head in a way that we could no longer ignore. It became visible. The veil was stripped back over the past 4 years or so. We could all rattle off a lot of examples of ways that our lives were changed in ways that many people never imagined possible. Can you take us through your thinking about what we've been through, what it revealed that was going on before most of us recognized it, and what you think is so serious about this?
Well, you want to talk about my particular article? It's an unusual piece, and I'm just quickly looking up to refresh my name of the author. Yeah, it's Philip Courtney. So what this article goes through is the sort of more or less unknown history of what's called the International Trade Organization. This was to be part of the Bretton Woods structure. So the Bretton Woods structure originally had a one world currency, an international monetary fund for banking and finance, for financial clearing, a World Bank for banking, and then a gold standard, a gold exchange standard to anchor the monetary system, plus an international trade organization, the ITO, that was going to guarantee fair trade all over the world and serve as a kind of fiscal master of the planet. In those days, the Keynesians believed that the way to fine-tune an economy was to trade off between fiscal policy and monetary policy, and that if you do this really well with the experts in charge, then you can reduce inflation to as low as possible while simultaneously reducing unemployment, and then also prioritizing economic growth. So this is the belief. That was 1944 when this thing was sort of fleshed out. And then 3 years later, there was a thing called the Havana Charter, which all governments in the world were going to sign on to the ITO and commit themselves to what they hoped to be a kind of increasingly low tariff regime with ever fewer barriers, but then also commit governments to certain kinds of Keynesian-style policies. In the end, the ITO did not get through, and instead it was defeated. And instead, by 1948, we got the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which was specifically named so it wouldn't sound like the ITO. It was like a general agreement. So there you have it. It's a general agreement. It's not like a system. It's just general. It's an agreement, so it's not imposed on anybody. And it's just going to pertain to tariffs and trade, not fiscal policy. So it's a much reduced form, and the U.S. Signed on to that. The ITO was resurrected with, as you can guess, with the World Trade Organization. That was many years later, 1995. We had a World Trade Organization come along that had a treaty that was thousands and thousands of pages long. As a kind of a fallout from NAFTA, which was similarly thousands, tens of thousands of pages long. But by the 90s, the free market people, the advocates of free trade, started rallying around these big agreements, the World Trade Organization, which is kind of dead now, along with NAFTA. And at that time, I opposed all these agreements on grounds that free trade does not consist of creating international bureaucracies. This is really a kind of a bad idea. There's all sorts of major problems with these things. But that real free trade in the 19th, 18th, 19th century sense is just let spontaneous agreements develop between producers and consumers and all countries, buying from whom you want, selling to whom you want, while maintaining national sovereignty. And that could include tariffs, maybe not, right? It depends on the nation and the conditions and their revenue priorities and there's a lot of factors that go into that. But real free trade preserves national sovereignty precisely so you can also preserve the right of citizens to control through plebiscite the regime under which they live. More globalism means less democracy, less citizen control. The preservation of national sovereignty mitigates against the construction of global institutions. What I find so fascinating about the history of this, the failure of the ITO back in the post-war period in the late 1940s, was that the people who inveighed against it the most were the free market people, the people who favored old-fashioned forms of free trade, because they said, you don't need international bureaucracies to manage trade. That's very dangerous. You don't want to construct globalist systems that disenfranchise the citizens of each nation. You don't want to lock nations into policy positions, as recommended by experts that are inconsistent with what people within each nation actually want. This is an unstable situation. If you get free trade by force, it's not going to be sustainable. That's what that generation said in the late 1940s. And I think that's exactly what happened. Once the ITO was resurrected as the World Trade Organization, now everybody's really mad at globalism, the global institutions, the global bureaucracies, especially in the wake of the COVID fiasco, in which the global institutions did impose on everyone, all the way down to their schools, their churches, their homes, their businesses, and then ultimately forcing injection of an experimental potion designed to cure the pathogen, which it did not do. So I guess my argument of this piece is that there are no shortcuts to getting to freedom. That if you impose what you call freedom from the top down, and remove it from citizen control of government, you will eventually create a backlash that will reverse whatever gains came out of the previous period. And that's my argument, that's the times in which we live right now.
In this scenario that you just outlined, most people don't realize, and I didn't, that this went back to 1944 in the Bretton Woods, and that there were already grand plans being laid. I guess I was aware of the League of Nations prior to the UN and sort of some globalist leanings that had happened prior to that, but didn't realize all that was planned here. When you talk about the impact on ordinary people's lives and the intrusions on our personal and family and national sovereignty. What things rise to the top of your list of concerns, either because they were shocking when they were revealed that they were actually in play, or that you think that most people haven't fully grasped how serious they are, or that you see them they're still have a lot of momentum and we should be not lulled into complacency thinking that, well, that's over now. We've gotten through the whole COVID-19 era and therefore we're in the clear. What things still remain of grave concern to you in that regards?
The single most damaging thing was the school closures. I don't think there's any debate about that. If you want to make a hierarchy of policies that were most damaging, the school closures would rank to the top. Because that just massively diminished literacy and got all kinds of, a whole generation of school-age kids addicted to social media, which in turn drove all sorts of pathologies. It's not a coincidence that immediately following the COVID lockdowns, we saw the explosion of gender dysphoria everywhere. This is what happens when you lock people in a room and tell them to make TikTok their best friend. It makes you crazy. So on one hand, I'm gratified that I feel like that's more and more conventional wisdom that those schools should not have been shut. There's some real regret about that. And over the weekend, the White House and the Trump administration replaced COVID.gov with a new link that has a pretty powerful repudiation of all the policies of the COVID period, including those which began under the first Trump administration, which I don't think people are pointing this out. And the press is so lazy. Everybody who's reported on this thinks that this link is all about blaming Fauci for a lab leak in Wuhan. Okay, well, that's how it starts, but it goes much further. It makes fun of social distancing. It debunks the idea that masks can stop the spread of a respiratory virus. It blasts all sorts of coercive policies, including mandates. It's limited in the sense that it doesn't go into the details of how all this stuff came to be, but it's generally a really good link and it's good stuff. The problem is that the existing protocols within public health and epidemiology are even more firmly now attached to paradigms that were almost marginal in 2019, namely the idea that you should lock down the entire society in the event of a new pathogen, a novel pathogen, as they say, and wait for an mRNA shot. Okay, so that is a kind of more mainstream within epidemiological circles than it's ever been before. That's one of the consequences of COVID, that it sort of entrenched this idea. And yeah, there's a lot of debate about this, but I don't think people understand just how pressing this is within the profession of public health. And nothing has happened to the sheer power of the pharmaceutical industry that was, really the driving engine of the lockdowns, the school closures, everything came out of this sort of industrial lobby, the censorship too. Everything came out of this industrial lobbying by the pharmaceutical companies, and they're just as powerful now as they've ever been.
One of the ways that power was expressed was over mind control of influence of what people thought about and how they felt for years. There was 7x24 coverage across all of the major media outlets, drilling into people's minds fear-based messages about skyrocketing numbers and severities and fatalities and case counts and all this stuff. And as with any advertising campaign, we've learned way back from Vance Packard and Hidden Persuaders, or back in the 60s and the 70s and all that first you hurt people and then you show them that the solution to their pain is to buy whatever you're selling. And therefore you're going to be the savior. You're going to step in and say, but when you control all of the or most of the channels of information that people receive. Can you talk to us about that, the insidiousness of that mental dominance and messaging dominance that basically took over all the air in the room and the thought space of the whole world?
It's almost creepy what we went through. There was a shock and awe initially, so you can't travel, you have to stay home, you can't have house parties, you can't go to church on Easter. 5 years ago, the Vatican shut down for all public services on Easter. So, and so it was a global response. Almost every government, but like 2 or 3, went along with all this stuff. So it was really shocking. And the very next announcement was, well, if you want to go back to normal, then you have to cover up your face. You have to put this face covering from China on your face, And then people didn't like that. They said, okay, well, you don't like the masks. Not a problem. Just get the shot. And that was, 9 months later, 10 months later. Suddenly we all were encouraged to shoot ourselves up with some medicine that we didn't really need. I mean, most working age people, healthy people, didn't need the shot. Even if it had worked, it was completely unnecessary. So there were a lot of people that just didn't want to do it. And they said, well, look, if you don't get the shot, you have to keep wearing your mask. But if you do get the shot, you can take that face covering off. So a lot of people got the shot. And then it turned out you still have to wear your mask. And, you still have to obey domestic, capacity restrictions and so on. So this is our world. And I had great hopes once the first Trump administration left office that the Biden administration would dial it all back and say, okay, this was all dumb. They didn't. They went the opposite direction because they were, at this point, were alarmed at how they were concerned that there wasn't going to be a huge amount of vaccine uptake. So they wanted to drive it to 70, 80, and then 90%. And the only way they could get there was by increasing the fear campaigns, censoring people ever more on social media, taking tighter control of media outlets, throwing more money around to NGOs to propagandize the public, and finally mandating that everybody get the shots at the penalty of losing their jobs or getting kicked out of school. So this actually happened to us, and it went on an additional 2 years, finally getting sort of dialed back a little bit by 2023. But I don't know. I mean, I was just somewhere over the weekend, and there were fresh, newly painted, newly stuck signs to socially distance. So, it's not gone. It's not gone. It's still with us, and we're still traumatized. Another major thing that happened, and I'm waiting to get some data on this, is that there's been a vast degree of substance abuse that has increased since those days. That's not a shock, but something that people don't understand, there's a much greater use of pharmaceutical psych meds among adults and children. So there's a culture surrounding psych meds, which is that if you feel uncomfortable or you feel sad or you feel depressed or you feel unenergetic, you're not getting to sleep or you're sleeping too long, whatever's wrong with you, there's a pill that you can take. And there are hundreds of these things, none of which have been subjected to any kind of serious clinical trials or anything like that, beyond a couple of weeks or whatever. And they're dispensed by experts who are getting paid to get people addicted to these things. So now you've got a vast number of adults and children living off psych meds that don't work to solve the underlying problems, and then get cured by adding more psych meds. So this is probably the next major epidemic we're going to face, not just chronic disease about which RFK talks, but medical addiction to psych med pharmaceuticals. It's not considered substance abuse, right? Like if you're using meth or cocaine or liquor, that's abuse. But if you're taking 21 different psych meds, that's just compliance.
It's hard to escape even passing notice when you're watching mainstream channels on the media that the majority of advertising time is being taken up by the big pharma medical, and that many of these are exactly what you say. And the same observation that you just made is something that's been made by myself and others, and that is that there's this creeping awareness that we're being inundated with this message that it's normal to have something wrong with your mind and your emotions, and that the pharmaceutical response, no matter how dangerous, if you read the, rather than looking at the nice slow motion pictures of people smiling and being happy, read the descriptions as saying below about the serious life altering or life ending risks that can come with those, and especially when using unknown combinations, etc. So that's becoming the new normal.
A lot of them come with what so-called black box warnings. I mean, I was watching. I don't watch a lot of TV, but it's also, and there's a very famous pharmaceutical designed for whatever kind of tag they want to put on whatever kind of made up condition you have, whether it's schizophrenia or bipolar or borderline or, whatever. And it said, take this thing. And then, of course, they list the side effects at the end, which are a fraction of the side effects, just what they can fit in. But one of them was death. Death? So you're selling me something that you admit could cause me to die. And that's what TV offers. It's just incredible. Maybe this was going on before the pandemic, but I don't know. So the problem is that the pandemic response broke people, shattered their worlds, led people to a great deal of anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and so on. And then what do? They turn to the same industry that pushed this response to solve all the psychological problems associated with it. I mean, it is so deeply tragic. And we're not anywhere near coming to terms with this. Like, everybody will tell you it's better to be sober than drunk, but nobody will tell you that it's better not to take any psych meds than take them. It's, no, you should definitely take your meds if you're sad or depressed or unfocused or sleepy or have insomnia or whatever. There's always a med for you, and there's a doctor who can give it to you. I've been reading this book over the weekend. It's one of the reasons it's on my mind, but it's called Unshrunk by Laura Delano. Just came out, and she was a psych med patient for the better part of 13 years. Highborn, access to all the top doctors, endless funds in her family to pay for all the treatment she could ever get. And at some point, she's not getting better. And she finally realizes, well, maybe the problem is the drugs themselves. So it took her, 12 years to realize this. And when she started getting off the drugs, of course, your body doesn't like that because your body adapts to the new drugs. And so she went to the doctor and said, I tried to drop this one, but it kind of makes me feel awkward. And they said, oh, well, now you have discontinuation syndrome. That is a new condition you have, and you gave it to yourself by stopping your meds. So here's another med you can take to fix discontinuation syndrome. So you see how it goes? So here's where we are, as a culture and society. And that doesn't even speak to all the economic problems and the financial problems and the political problems, the cultural problems. But the psychological leftover from this period is devastating and truly, I think, like underestimated. It's a tragedy. And the people we're relying on to fix this problem are the same people who created the last problem.
Yeah, so not only is there conflict of interest, but there's been no accountability, truth and reconciliation there, and in clearing of the house. One of the things you passed along the way was you talked about when you talked about the Bretton Woods Agreement and the original global intentions for controlling all aspects of international trade centrally through a compulsory arrangement. We saw rear its head as well during these last 4 years or so, and it was in the form of, well, we're just following guidelines in accordance with international and national guidelines. So you had local institutions, whether it was schools, hospitals, clinics, churches, on and on and on, really clamping down on people's lives, but not taking personal responsibility for doing so, saying, we're just following guidelines. And that seems to be a radical departure from the concept of sovereignty of the individual, family, city, state, country. And it seemed like, who are these nameless, faceless individuals who are setting these policies, which everybody is suddenly marching in lockstep to across the world? Can you talk to us about your observations about that shift in influence over people's lives, and that without even, you could say, without firing a shot or without invading a country, being able to just take over all the countries of the world by saying, you will comply with these guidelines from on high.
And without even passing any legislation or laws. That was what was strange about it. We learned a lot about the way things work at this period. So, you're in a town, you're in rural Texas, wherever, and you want to go to the bar and try to settle up to the bar. They say, no, you can't come in because of COVID. Well, who says? Well, I would let you, but our local public health people say absolutely not. They want us closed. Well, are they forcing you to close? Well, they're strongly suggesting it, and I don't know what the consequences would be if I don't go along. I might
lose your license. Yeah.
Plus, I don't want to be outed by the local media. They're crawling all over me, calling me a super spreader and so on. I don't know. I'm just better off complying with it. So then you go to the local public health place and say, why are you recommending this? There's no evidence that bars are super spreader places and that people are going to die. Well, we don't know. We just do what the state board of health is telling us, and they told us that. Then you go to state board of health. It's like, well, why are you doing this? Well, yeah, CDC and has its recommendations. That's the federal agency, and we've got to comply with what CDC says. Then you go to CDC. Why are you doing this? Well, it's all because of the World Health Organization. All we're doing is going along with what the World Health Organization says. And then you go to the World Health Organization that, well, we're just relying on what the experts say. And so on it goes. Now, we're like 6 layers deep into this nonsense. There's been no new laws passed, no clarity.
I thought you were going to get to the point where we're following the science, and you go, wait a minute, where's the science? And then Fauci says, if you're questioning me, you're questioning science. But you didn't get very
That's a good ending to the story. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good ending to the story. So, yeah. And meanwhile, there were no laws passed, no legislation, no real penalties. And yet the world, the entire globe gets shut down in a kind of a totalitarian brutalism that the likes of which we've never experienced. But we have nobody really to blame for it, and nobody to take responsibility for it. That was a strange lesson. And it really did shatter people's confidence in everything, in academia, in intellectuals, and elites, in media, in government, in medicine, and in vaccines for sure, but much more besides. So in dealing with, what do you do in wake of a fallout like that? And I think you do kind of what Trump is doing, which is just this taking a wrecking ball to everything, which I think is unwise. I mean, I think it's wise in some areas, but not wise in others. But there's a kind of a nihilism, a political nihilism that has befallen this country and many others that just want to destroy everything. And like I say, that's sort of fun and delightful to tear up the pea patch, but then when you might want peas, I mean, there's a danger here, and my concern as of this discussion right now, and my attitude changes on this day to day, and sometimes from the morning to the night and back again. But I'm very concerned that Trump's extremist trade agenda, based on very crude formulation of the dollar value of goods flowing from export countries to import countries and back again, in his view, should be identical. I don't know whoever made that rule, but that's what he believes, and that you can use tariffs to re-equalize that. And he sent out a post this morning with something like 8 ways in which non-tariff barriers can evade tariff barriers, which is like a permission, to charge unlimited amounts of tariffs on anyone, anywhere in the world, forever. And it's causing a tremendous amount of chaos in the financial markets. And we don't actually know what the fallout of this is going to be. DHL is stopping shipments to the U.S. I mean, in some sense, it feels like another form of lockdowns. And it's breaking my heart in a way for a number of reasons. One is he's addressing a real concern, which has to do with the loss of American manufacturing and the failure of international trade accounts to settle and to create a situation in which, China will be forever the producer of everything for everyone in the world, and that nobody else will make anything. Okay, so that's awkward. It's weird. It's not really consistent with what we think of the results of normal free trade have been in the past. So that's a genuine problem that's crying out to be solved. But I don't think these blunt instruments that Trump's doing have been as carefully thought through as they should have been. I mean, the guy who's the guru behind it is not a practitioner of international trade. He's never been in the financial markets. He doesn't understand bond markets. He doesn't understand international division of labor. He doesn't know anything about supply chains. He's an academic. He's an academic who hates China. And that's Peter Navarro, who I know count as a friend. But on this subject, that's not really your best go-to person, but he's got Trump's ear. And the real sad thing about this is, first of all, we don't know what kind of damage this is going to cause. And we don't know the consequences of this. So he's already promised to bail out the farmers. Who's he going to bail out next? I mean, there's a lot of people to bail out. And that's going to balloon the budget deficit. The other thing that makes me really sad about what's happening right now is that Trump has done so much good since taking office. The elimination of critical race theory, the abolishment of DEI, the gutting of many of the worst features of the federal workforce, the abolition of USAID, and really targeting a lot of the things that DOJ has done. A lot of what DOJ has done has just been fantastic. And there's so much more. He's enterprise oriented. He's eliminating a lot of regulations. He's going after the regulations on shower heads and dishwashers. And I totally love all this stuff. He's eliminated the censorship that was being pushed by federal agencies. There's so many brilliant things that have happened. I'm afraid that it's all being put at risk by this kind of wild tariff policy that is shocking the markets. Now, I don't think that's the entire reason for why the financials are so weak right now. Probably we needed a major dial back, from the heights we've been on, which are mostly based on money printing and air. The problem is that it's made it impossible for anybody to blame anything but Trump and his tariffs. I mean, that is 100% taking all the blame for everything that's happening in the financial markets right now, which means Trump, which means the Republicans, which means it's putting at risk everything else that Trump is doing that's good, and preparing for a possible backlash that will be truly terrible.
Along the way, you also talked about some of the changes that were imposed from without upon us, and the impacts on people's mental health, and the sense of loss of, I guess, loss of self-sovereignty and powerlessness over our lives. When you talk about 10,000 pages of this, or tens of thousands of pages here and thousands of pages there, it often has seemed to many people that these things are so big and so overwhelming and so unknowable, so inscrutable, that they just leave it up to experts. But you've also written about the loss of confidence in experts, and that's some of the things you were talking about. So specifically in the area of the economy and our financial lives, where do you see that taking effect right now in people's lives, this loss of confidence in experts? Because if it was going to be the Fed that was going to save us by setting the correct interest rate that was going to solve all of these problems, what do you think is a more sober, realistic view that people can hold on to that would give them a sense of real clarity about what they can and must do in their own lives, rather than just feeling like it's all out of my hands. The experts are going to do whatever they're going to do?
Well, I guess I'm pretty sure that a major step that almost everybody needs to take right now, and we could all do better, is to revisit the virtue of frugality. Cutting back.
Here's the recent article you just penned on that, America and the Spirit of Frugality.
Yeah.
Folks, people, if you don't want to miss out on any of Jeffrey's latest writing, you'll find a lot of it in Epic Times as well as on his Brownstone Institute, which we'll put a link to in the description. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, we don't know what frugality is anymore. I mean, we've completely lost a sense of that. Not buying things you don't need. Learning how to cook at home. Learning how to curb your wild spending. Pay off your debts. Repurposing clothes. I mean, buying from eBay rather than retail, and so on. I mean, this is the kinds of things that the virtue of frugality has got to make a return in people's lives. There's no way anybody can keep up with current spending under these conditions. It should have already happened, but unfortunately, there's a funny way in which the lockdown period actually spread a kind of materialist decadence among the laptop class. So they got them used to just doing nothing and making a lot of money for it. And, that is not sustainable. And yeah, I'm afraid we're in for a rough 4 years, which maybe it would have happened regardless. But I'm just telling you that Trump administration's trade policies are sort of guaranteeing that it's going to happen, and also guaranteeing that he's going to catch the blame for it. That's not a good situation.
Jeffrey, if people want to take in your latest thinking and writing, where's the best place for them to get plugged in so that they can stay up to date with you and your latest writing?
Well, I try to write every day for Epoch Times, and I succeed. Actually, I succeed all but Sunday. And so that's every day. Usually the weekly edition prints one of them. The editors get to decide what they want to print. And then in addition to that, I write for Brownstone. For Brownstone allows me to dig maybe a little deeper. It's more of a specialized audience and maybe more of a patient audience. So that's why I write, the history of the International Trade Organization and, that sort of thing. Like, articles that are not exactly for a popular audience. They're a little more specialized and a little more precise. But Brownstone is a baby I love, but it's an extremely important institution. We've been enormously influential in a lot of the reversal of the COVID policies and the latest admissions. I mean, COVID.gov right now has content that was directly inspired by a subcommittee Senate report, 300-page, that was itself modeled on a report called the Norfolk Group report that we had put together 3 years ago. So I see through the work of Brownstone the direct way in which influence over public affairs, influence over the public mind, converts into influence over public affairs. But so I like to see this kind of progress. But one thing I've learned over the last, I guess you would say over the last 5 years, is that you can't expect even linear progress in any area of life, apparently, especially not in politics. So we're in the situation right now of, taking the good with the bad, and being on the outside, just calling balls and strikes as we see them.
It's really an eye-opener, folks. If you go to brownstone.org, here's a list of some of the topics that you can see there. There's an entire raft of articles about economics, government, censorship, society, technology, philosophy, education, history, policy, law, media, masks, vaccine, pharma, and on it goes. It's not a one-channel, one-topic organization, but and there's dozens and dozens, if not maybe hundreds of authors who've contributed there. It's really remarkable. If you look at your list of authors, I was finding you to reach out and contact you, and I could hardly get down to the T's to find you. Yeah. So anyway, there's a lot there to take in, and it's very enriching. It's like finding a treasure trove. So I would encourage everyone to take a look. And Jeffrey, we're grateful for your presence here on Liberty and Finance. You write a lot about liberty. You write a lot about finance, so I have a feeling that we'll be asking you back often. I hope that you'll be able to fit us in your schedule. And on behalf of all of our viewers and subscribers, thanks again for joining us here.
My pleasure.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for April 22nd through April 29th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, we feature 1-ounce silver Canadian maples at their lowest premium in years at just $3.49 over spot. Next, 1-ounce Gold Philharmonics are only $65 over spot. 1 10th-ounce Platinum Britannia are just $29 over melt. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.